One scorching day in Los Angeles, something super crazy happened at a prison. A super dangerous guy named Richard Pace somehow escaped from there. It was so weird because no one, not even his prison buddy who'd been hanging out with him for 3 whole years, had any clue where Richard went. The buddy guy was like, "I didn't even know he ran away." This confused Schultz, who was the boss of the prison. Now, Schultz wasn't a cop or a prison guard. Nope, he was the big boss of a giant company. This prison was super guarded, like, no one could just sneak out. But Richard did. Schultz was all scratching his head because he was so sure Richard couldn't just run off like that. Meanwhile, Richard was having a blast enjoying his freedom at a fancy rich people's bar. There, he met a dude named Prince. Richard noticed something cool. Prince had this super fancy watch, like, only 2 of those watches existed in the whole wide world. Richard tried to be sneaky and snatch Prince's wallet, thinking Prince was super rich. But, oopsie, it didn't work. Prince's bodyguard stopped him. But, guess what? Richard didn't give up. He got the key to Prince's place and went on a hunt. Soon enough, Richard found out where Prince was staying. He snooped around Prince's room, found the fancy watch collection, and just grabbed it. With no time to waste, he bolted out and vanished into thin air. Prince, who just walked into his room, finally realized his watches were gone. He told his bodyguards to find that sneaky thief. Meanwhile, Schultz and the FBI got a tip that Richard was spotted at a fancy hotel. They split up to catch him, but Richard was like a genius sneaky guy. He slipped out of the building without anyone catching him and, guess what, found a sports car in the hotel lobby. And guess who the driver was? Yup, it was Prince himself. Richard was shocked. Prince wasn't just hanging out for no reason, he wanted Richard to join him in a sneaky plan. Turns out, Prince didn't do this alone. He had 3 other buddies, and together, they were called the Misfits. These Misfits were like modern-day Robin Hoods. They'd swipe stuff from rich folks and share it with people who needed it. Super sneaky, right? The Misfits, led by a guy named Ringo, were like a cool team of sneaky experts. Ringo was a master of disguises who picked out their targets. There was also Wick, the fireworks expert who loved playing with fire since he was a kid. He thought it kept evil spirits away. Lastly, there was Violet, the tough lady on the team who didn't trust men but was super reliable. When Richard met them, he wasn't too impressed. He'd always done stuff solo, so teaming up didn't seem cool. But Prince had this plan to swipe loads of gold worth mega bucks from a prison owned by Schultz, the same guy who owned the prison Richard escaped from. Schultz planned to use the gold for something bad, so the Misfits wanted to swipe it first. Richard wasn't into sharing, so he bailed and decided to party at fancy hotels in Abu Dhabi instead. At one of these parties, Richard spotted a dude with an expensive watch. He used his old trick to snatch the guy's wallet. The guy got annoyed and told Richard to scramble. But when Richard bumped into a lady in a hurry, he realized she had slipped a kid's wallet. It hit him, this was his daughter, Hope. After years, he finally met her. Hope was all grown up, working for UNICEF and focusing on kids' welfare worldwide. She hadn't married because her parents' split messed her up. They talked and then went their separate ways. This whole thing shook Richard. He kept thinking about the Misfits' job offer. The next day, he decided to join them, but only if he could be the boss and take more than half of the loot. The Misfits then spilled the beans. They were planning to donate everything to UNICEF for kids' welfare, and they'd keep it all on the down low. So, Richard decided to ditch the plan when he heard about the Misfits donating everything to UNICEF. But, surprise! Hope had planned his arrival all along. She'd asked the Misfits to go ahead with the mission until she thought her dad's skills were needed because the gold they were stealing would fund terrorism by a guy named Hiroa. Richard, having no choice, joined the team. Their first task was figuring out where the gold was in Schultz's prison. Using the prison plan, Richard guessed it was under a toilet. Security was super tight, and they had to find a way in. The next day, they had to leave pronto. Richard wanted a cool sports car, but since he was a wanted guy, they had to roll with camels through the desert. Ringo thought this would keep the FBI and Schultz off their trail. The desert journey was long, and they rested in the middle of nowhere. When it got dark, Hope was sitting alone. Richard felt guilty for leaving her as a kid, but now he promised to be there for her. The next day, they reached a hotel. Violet roomed with Hope to keep the father-daughter emotions from messing with the mission. In a secret meeting, Richard split them into teams. He and Ringo disguised themselves to spy on gold transactions between Hirawa and Schultz's men. Richard switched the gold suitcase for one full of books, making Hirawa think Schultz was trying to trick him. Despite this, Hirawa gave Schultz a chance, but they had to meet in person within 3 days. Ringo posed as a Bay Area supervisor, claiming the kitchen steamers weren't up to snuff. The warden ordered new ones, connected directly to Richard. The Misfits also had a prison informant. When Richard and Wick delivered the steamers, they swapped their uniforms for prisoner outfits. Working in the kitchen, Wick poisoned the food, making half the prisoners sick. The chaos made the warden call for an ambulance. So, Schultz hurried to check his gold safe during the chaos in the prison. Richard and Wick, during the turmoil, infiltrated the prison toilet and successfully detonated the gold safe with a car bomb outside, diverting attention. They managed to take the gold without anyone noticing. Schultz grew suspicious when he found the safe emptied on CCTV. As he frantically searched for the robbers, he almost uncovered Richard and Wick in their doctor and patient disguises, but they narrowly escaped. Schultz, convinced that Richard was behind it all, chased them down the street. Schultz's men reported they had Richard's daughter hostage, causing the Misfits to believe the mission failed. However, Schultz, upon cornering them, realized the truck was empty. Threatening the Misfits with a gun, he demanded Richard's location. The royal guards intervened, revealing Prince was part of the team. Hirawa, witnessing this, no longer trusted Schultz and wanted to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the kidnapped woman, Violet, showcased her combat skills, swiftly defeating her captors. The Misfits and Hope safely returned to their hideout, only to realize Richard was missing. According to the plan, Richard and Wick took different paths. Richard successfully melted the gold into a statue, fooling even Hope. Hope thought her father had taken the gold, but Richard had donated it all to UNICEF. The Misfits, developing a close bond, asked Richard to join them. Together, they aimed to eradicate evil and spread goodness, becoming the world's biggest donors in history.